Hey VCers, it's Matt again. Thought I'd make another video tonight and continue on with the Kinks review series. So, wanted to backtrack for a moment. The last album I reviewed, 1978's Misfits. It's an awful album, but one thing that I meant to point out that I forgot was in the song Misfits, which is one of the few halfway decent songs on the album, but there's a lyric line here that says, you set out to outrage, but you can't get arrested. You say your image is new, but it looks well tested. And I can't help but think that that might be 1977-78. The punk rock new wave revolution is raging, and that might be Ray's swipe at Johnny Rotten and Company, maybe, saying that whatever you guys think you're doing, we did that 13 years ago, which is certainly true, but it would have been nice if they could have backed that up with a good album. Instead, they backed it up with a piece of crap album, to be honest. But enough about Misfits. We move on to much happier terrain with 1979's Low Budget. This album was actually a hit for the Kinks. It made number 11 in the U.S., their biggest seller. It became, at the time, I don't know if it still is, but much more successful than any of their albums in the 70s, save for Lola, and much better album than anything they did in the 70s, with the possible exception of Lola. And so, yeah, like I said, it was a joy to go through the 60s Kinks albums. They are my second favorite band after all, and review those for you all. Getting through the 70s albums, many of which I'd never heard before, other than a song or two off of each one, was a learning experience, and I guess it was fun and interesting. And those albums did have their moments. Most of them had a few songs, but wasn't much fun slogging through those albums because they're just, truth be told, they're not great. And a few good songs aside, I think you could take all of those songs from Muswell Hillbillies up through Misfits and cherry pick songs off of them and maybe make an album, maybe an album and a half worth of good songs. The rest of that stuff is pretty dull and pretty filler. So, and I could just imagine if someone was a Kinks fan from the get-go that heard You Really Got Me way back in '64 and had their socks knocked off and fell in love with the band and followed them through the 60s, through all their highs of Sunny Afternoon and Face to Face and Waterloo Sunset and Village Green and Arthur, and then they hit the 70s after Lola and became diminishing returns really quick. And if someone like that stuck with the Kinks, I could see round about the time of Sleepwalker or Misfits, that person just finally throwing their hands up, if they hadn't already, and saying, well, these guys are never going to return to form. And so it must have come as quite a surprise to someone like this when Low Budget came out in 1979. And this album, like I said, 79 album, I bought this in 1980, which is when I really got into the band. But I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next album I'm going to review. And so, yeah, with Sleepwalker and Misfits, terrible albums, but they finally abandoned the rock opera and the concept scheme of things and eschewed that for going back to just albums of songs and shorter songs and just regular songs. Problem was, on those albums, the songs weren't very good, even though the instrumentation was okay, but they were just boring songs. And so finally with Low Budget, they get it right. They get the short poppy and rock songs that are actually catchy and interesting, and right from the get-go you know that something's different here. The album, well, first off, the album, I think it's called Low Budget, and I think it's kind of funny because you've got the cover here with this lady's feet and it says Low Budget. Back album just says Kinks Low Budget, the ladies moved on. There's no lyric sheet, no inserts, no nothing. Inside you get a Arista sleeve and the record, and there's not even a track listing on the album anywhere other than on the sleeve over the label. And so I guess low budget. The album comes with no frills or extras because they're on a low budget and they can't afford to do anything but the most basic of packaging. Maybe, I don't know. Uh, Again, I could be reading too much into that. But so yeah, the first song on side one, Attitude, starts off and it's Ray's singing more energetic and more joyously and pissed off and full of attitude for the first time that he has done in years, and getting into it. And it's really, right then that there's something different. The music throughout this album is spikier, rockier, punkier, more upbeat, more joyful. This is the first album in years where the Kinks sound like they're actually enjoying themselves and having fun, and they're actually comfortable. Probably having the most fun they've had since Arthur, and it's great to see them return to form. So Attitude cuts in with the guitar, the piano underneath comes in, and then comes Ray's snarling vocals, and it's a great, could actually have fit on one of the Jam or the Clash or Sex Pistols, Elvis Costello at the time, the younger breed that was coming up and along. And so, great opener. Next song, Catch Me Now I'm Falling, which steals the riff from Jumpin' Jack Flash, but still a great song. It's about the USA. That's the other thing. They recorded this album in New York. I think that's the first time they recorded in America. Could be wrong on that, but I think that's the first time at least they recorded an entire album in America. So there's a lot of stuff about the USA on this album, which is a change of pace from Ray's usual singing about England and quaint English villages and motorways and lifts and lorries and so forth, even though he still talks about a lorry strike in here, which is a truck, if those don't know. But Catch Me Now Falling, great song. Goes on maybe a couple of minutes too long, but can't really fault it for that, given the state of the Kinks albums that came before it. So you got two great songs to open up. Then you go into Pressure, another great rock and roll, punk, new wave sounding. Ray's, you just picture him jumping around and spouting out the lyrics and just overjoyed. Something got into him between Misfits and this album, and I'm certainly glad it did. But anyway, so then we have National Health, which is fourth song, and it's another hit, another great song. Sounds this great sing-along song. It's just really, I mean, it's just a great song. I don't know what to say about it, but it makes me think that the album 1978 album Some Girls by the Rolling Stones, I think that Ray just might have been enamored with the song Shattered off Some Girls, because he kind of apes Jagger-esque vocals on National Health, and there's a little churn-in guitar underneath the whole thing. Sounds a little bit like the guitar in Shattered. But it's a good song on its own merits, great song on its own merits. Side one ends with Wish I Could Fly Like Superman, which is a rock disco song, and for those of us that were around back in 1979, that was the big controversy when 78, 79, when, oh my God, the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney are doing disco songs. It's the end of the world, because back then it was, if anyone remembers the Disco Sucks t-shirts, and you were in one camp or the other and all that, which all seems kind of long ago and silly now. But anyway, it's a great song. It's Wish I Could Fly Like Superman, and it's kind of has the, doesn't sound like it, but kind of in the same mode as Heart of Glass by Blondie. That was the other thing. Blondie was this punk rock band, and then they did this disco song and had a hit, and so they sold out, and that was the the view that a lot of people had back then. Nowadays, it's all just great music and doesn't really matter. But anyway, so yeah, Wish I Could Fly Like Superman. Of course, Debbie Harry is a lot more fun to look at than Ray and Dave, much as I like Ray and Dave. But yeah, so we've got Not a Bad Song on side one, and it's been years since you could say that about a Kinks album, and it's just got me overjoyed and over the moon. We go to side two. First song is the title track, Low Budget. Another great song, another great sing along. Remember when we were, yeah, what was this, 79 this came out, I would have been 15 and 16, and then 80 was when I actually bought the album. I would have been 16 and 17, but me and my buddies, we used to drink a few drinks and sing Low Budget a lot, so good times back then. But that's a great song. In a Space continues, another great song, and a little bit of emotion. Finally, In a Space is a great song. It's a very tight little new wave sounding thing. And then side two, the album sort of stalls a little bit towards the end. You got a little bit of emotion, which is a ballad, first slow song on the album. It's not a bad ballad. It's pretty good. It just sort of throws a wrench in the momentum of the album, I guess. But it's not out of place or bad. But it's okay. But after you've had that's two, and after you've had seven boom, 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 great songs in a row, you get a ballad that's just okay. I can live with that. Then you got A Gallon of Gas, which is sort of a bluesy sounding, musically song, kind of tired, bluesy sounding, but not a bad song. Misery, it's just okay. And then you end the album with kind of a dancey ballad thing called Moving Pictures, which is a good way to end the album because it's another great song. So you've got 8 great songs and 2 pretty good songs and 1 song that's just okay. And the Kinks hadn't done that in years. And so, yeah. But a lot of people, Kinks fans, say this is where they go arena rock and popular and kind of sold out. It's probably true. That's where Ray's focus changes to hits in America from England, and that's probably true to some degree too. But you know, it's a good album, and I'll take this over any of the stuff they did in the 70s, maybe even Lola. Now, again, as I've said before in these videos, they get good here and they stay good for a few years. They never return to what they did in the 60s, but then again, neither did the Rolling Stones or the Who or the Beatles or, you know, mostly pretty much anyone you can think of. So can't really hold that against them. But 79 came out. I bought this album in 80. I was listening to this. I've had this as my copy that I bought in 1980. It had been quite a few years since I'd listened to this album, and I pulled it out the other day because I knew the review was coming up, and it just blew me away how good it was. I mean, I remembered the songs. Some of them I hadn't heard in a long time, so it was kind of like didn't remember them that well, but most of the songs on here I knew because I'd played this album to death back in the old days. It was great to hear again. It made me feel like I wish I wasn't a boring old guy, and I wish I was still 17. I'd call up my friends who are now boring old married guys, and we'd, you know, get a 6-pack and cruise Camp Bowie and look for girls and have fun like we used to. So, I mean, a big part of that is nostalgia because this came out just at the right time when I was 16 or whatever. And a big part of it, though, is that this is a really good album. It's a solid album. It's some of the stuff on here is topical for the times. It talks about gas lines and sort of the inflation and Iranian hostage crisis. It doesn't really talk about the hostage crisis literally, but it refers to it, you know, and things like that were going on in the world and in America in 78, 79 period. But it's not really dated, so that doesn't really matter. A lot of that stuff like recession and all, I guess we can unfortunately relate to nowadays too. But it's you know, if you were around in '79, a lot of this stuff, and you're listening to this, you're going to remember what was going on then. But if you weren't, or you don't care about that, you can listen to this album, and it's just great. It's just like I said, they're having fun. It sounds like, and they're getting into the music, and they're inspired, and they're re-energized for the first time, probably 10 years since Arthur. And so yeah, it's not what they did in the '60s, but it's pretty darn good, and it's better than what they did in the other part of the '70s. So what else do I got? I'm just looking at my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. But yeah, it's I guess maybe new wave and punk rock inspired Ray, or maybe the Rolling Stones, Some Girls to some degree, or maybe recording in America, change of location inspired him. Maybe he just finally was in the mood to write some hit songs again. Either way, it's a great album. The Kinks are back, and things will stay good for a while here. Scale of 1 to 10, you know, I gave things like Village Green and Face to Face and Arthur 10s. This isn't in that category, but on its own merits, I'd say this is I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9. It's that good. And if you're going to get a Kinks album from the '70s, this one or Lola, and I don't know, I might like this a little more than Lola, even just because I personally was there kind of when it came out. Bought it the year after, but I mean, so there's the sentimental thing, but it's fun. It's good. It's Listening to this album, it's hard not to jump around the room and dance a little bit. It's hard not to sing along. The vocals are great. The music is great. The lyrics are great. The album is great. The Kinks are back, and it's a 9. If you don't have this one, you want to run out and buy it. And so yeah, it's fun to have a Kinks album that's fun to listen to again after slogging through all those concept and rock opera '70s albums that really aren't that good. And it's good to see the Kinks return to form.